Great piece, great piece, great piece. Man, this we're gonna continue to talk about different things and kind of like go over um, everything as it comes. You know, I want to really ride home about talking about things that are of importance to someone that's trying to find themselves, and also to um, the power structure who can influence change. Because this is when we look at channels, right? Specifically, like the high vibrational channels such as mine, right? It's not about boasting. It's not about pushing and shoving. It's not about um, empty bravado. It's not about souring someone else's experience. It's not about that. It's about pride. It's about having racial intactness. And I think like YouTube is just starting to figure out that I'm not an aguave hunter. I'm not a peanut butter hunter. You know what I mean? I think they just starting to figure that out because when I see quantum physics kind of computing deliveries that, is kind of up my alley where everybody looks the same and stuff like that. U.S. citizens, U.S. residents, U.S. aliens, they don't get that in America. The thing that's sort of pushed on television is white pride, white fragility, white power. That's what's pushed. It's not Ibrahim Traore, nationalizing all of the assets that's on Burkina Faso's land. It's not that at all. They don't even want to talk about that. If you want to get that information, you have to go, man, they're playing kind of close. You have to go to independent media. And I keep saying that, with everything that's happening within Africa, right? And how everybody is kind of like disassociated for, what's really happening on the ground. Like, you're African, right? You're separated by borders. You're separated. Like, you're separated essentially by borders. You're separated by borders. When you look at everything and how it's kind of happening and you see like, if you want to meet an African American who just got here first generation, they're still learning the land. You got to go to the suburbs where they are, right? Because they're kind of put in certain belts of the city or certain belts of the state, where you kind of are left away from them and you got to sort of go through communities to try to find them and help them and stuff like that. I was juxtaposed with the question, why do people live their lives on social media? And I couldn't help but think like, well, this is our technology. You know what I mean? This is, it fits us given the fact that you have people in Sudan, you have people in America, you have people in Fiji who are kind of left with British colonials. You know what I mean? So it's like, what do you do at that point? You sort of figure things out from there. So it's only right that you do use, social media to get your message across and to reach out to people. So like, if you're not doing that, then it's sort of like, what are you doing at that point, But I kind of quickly realized that people, they pick on the low-hanging fruit, and then when they find out, like, wow, I got to reach for a high-hanging fruit, now I can't defend the fact that I went for a low-hanging fruit. So it's kind of like you just better off not even saying it, and this kind of also goes into the question, like, when you become of adult age and you sort of like get responsibilities, you can't no longer think about, wow, I got to take the trash out for, my mother now. You still do it, but it's like you don't think about it in that sense. It's backhanded, you know. That's the father's responsibility to do those things. You know, I look at, you know, how my neighbors are, right? Woman and man living together for all these years, and up into their 70s, they're still working around the yard. And, you know, I never put people on camera. I never talk to people in that sense, like, you know, just showing people around. I never do that because, you know, it's a comfortability factor there, you know. But you look at all of that goes on, and it's like you have to be responsible for yourself at a certain point. Like, because like you look at, you say you have a son, right? You have 2 daughters or anything like that. When they get of age, they have to live their own life. You know what I mean? And I wanted to kind of transition this conversation to that because, again, when people, they don't necessarily, you know, they hold people hostage. And I'm seeing this with black people in America. Like, black people in America are being held hostage. You know, you can't talk about African pride around someone who looks like this. You can't talk about African pride around someone who looks like that, you know. But when it becomes comfortable, you know, just being around Africans, now everybody kind of gravitates to seeing like what's happening there, and they become African now. So like we got to be very careful about, you know, who infiltrates circles and who kind of like, you know, takes on that responsibility of trying to be the maker and cream of that crop, because that's not for everybody. And I'm sort of seeing that, you know, like I'm really seeing that because, you know, here you are in America, and it sort of went from like the 60s where everybody had black pride because there was a lot of black people around right before the man started to get with the mulatto women and stuff like that, you know. Before all of that took place, it was so many black people around that everybody had black pride. But after a certain while, when everybody started, you know, mixing, the drug era came in the 70s, no one was marching on the Capitol buildings and stuff like that no more. No one was talking about Second Amendment right, First Amendment speech, you know, Third Amendment quartering. No one was talking about that stuff anymore. Now it became about, you know, what woman butt I'ma slap. You know what I'm saying? It became about that, like what woman who I was gonna go home with that night. Now you see we're in the thousands, right? And like you have the Rick Rosses, where they didn't necessarily live in that era, but you can see like they took a responsibility of being accountable for your actions that you didn't see in the 70s. And like this goes both ways, right? You see it, the women was mixing, the man was mixing. Now you see people like 50 Cent, who comes out with the book 50 a Law. Every African should have this book, which is a stamp from 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. So you see that, you know what I mean? So we're in the 2000s now. Like, you need social media. You know what I mean? Because like with social media, you can be on the internet all day just writing books, comparing computer logistics. You can be doing that all day. Like, people, you don't have to go far to find out who a hater is. You know, like, it can be a hater who can be living in the same house with you. You know what I mean? Like, it can be a hater living who just, you know, it can be anybody who you just see just walking past their house every day. It can be something like that. Haters are everywhere, man. And like, I'm really saying this because Africans, man, we are really getting it the worst. We don't have time to bicker among one another. We really don't. Like, we really need to be carving out land and surveying land and thinking about, like, okay, how can we export and import? We don't need to think about farming right now. Let people who know about, you know, agriculture do that. But Africans as a majority, we need to be worried about surveying land, getting away from people. You know what I mean? That's what we really need to be worried about right now. So, great peace, Yakoki.